I'm going to close the hearing on HB 1299, and I'm going to open the hearing on HB 1442. And the chair recognizes Representative Erica Leon, the prime sponsor of the bill.
Thank you, Chairman Lynn and members of the Judiciary Committee. For the record, my name is Erica Leon, and I represent the town of Derry, which is Rockingham 13. Before you, in House Bill 1442, you see a solution to some of the questions that were raised in the previous hearings. If you turn to page 2, the definitions of female and male recognize the biological reality of both typical sex in XY and also in those who have differences of sexual development. When a fetus is developing, if that child expresses a functional SRY gene, they develop penile tissue. If they do not develop penile tissue. As far as any of the other consequences of this difference in development, there's one other place where a person with 46X, 46XY, and functional ovarian tissue is female and presents as a female. That's somebody who may have an XY, but unless you're looking at their genetics, they're going to look like, they may look like those of us that wear some makeups, maybe look like some of us that are female and don't wear a ton of makeup, but that's not going to be anything where, unless you're doing a genetic test, you would have any reason to expect that they were not a standard XX female. What this does is this goes into our statutory definitions. In Chapter 21, we have number and gender, and we do have a permission to interchange female and male in many, many places. As I was reviewing every instance of the words of female, male, man, woman, girl, boy in the statutes, I actually recognize that the way that our law currently exists would allow men to access, because the words female and male are interchangeable, allow men to access services that are restricted only for women, like those for pregnant women, nursing women, and those with children. It's actually a big loophole that even if you don't believe that we need to move forward on the rest of it, we need to clarify that so that we can actually offer services to women when we intend to provide services to women. And so this language would clean up the definitions with biologically valid and supported definitions that get down to that basis. And then if you turn to page 3, gender identity, when it was placed in, was an area that not as many people had much experience with. In our statutes, it talked about asserting gender identity, but not for any improper purpose. But that is not defined anywhere. Quite frankly, if right now somebody who did what I did at Costco the other day, when the women's room was closed and only the men's room was open and no men were in there, I went into the men's room. If I had been challenged and at that time said that I identified as a man, there was nothing that the state could have done, but that would have been an improper assertion of gender identity. And we need to make sure that an improper assertion of gender identity can't ruin it for all these wonderful people behind me. Because when we allow somebody to just declare that they feel a certain way and walk in because their bathroom is closed, or perhaps for nefarious reasons, we put everybody behind me at risk. Let me say that again. If we don't have a way to close the door on people who are either taking advantage of a situation or bad actors, we put everybody here at risk. So this would have the language to say that it is an improper purpose for that. It does go a little bit further, saying that if a place is, I said specifically for males or females, but the language should be exclusively for males and females. If something is offered exclusively for females or exclusively for males, that is something where, if you turn back to our definitions, it would require that there needs to be a reason of either modesty or safety. You can't ask, it would be inappropriate to ask an Orthodox Jewish woman or a Muslim woman to provide a massage to a man. If it is appropriate to do that in the case of a man who identifies as a man and that is their deeply held religious belief that they will not go to their maker the way that they hope to at the end of their life. If they're also forced to provide services to a trans woman, that is something that causes a major, major conflict. The language that's in here would protect that for the purpose when you have the definition for the purpose of modesty or of safety. I do recognize that there are many behind me that do not appreciate the lived experience of many women who have actually been assaulted in bathrooms. I don't want to diminish the challenges that they face, but I do not want the experiences of some of my friends who have been assaulted in bathrooms to be brushed aside, saying that some people's feelings matter more than others. Within this bill, I truly think that the most critical sections of this are Section 2, Section 3, Section 4, and Section 9, because Section 9 clarifies the Civil Rights Act, saying that gender identity is asserted with proper purpose or disability. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to identify that with the disability. It was just reading through the phrases that are in the Civil Rights. And says that it is unlawful for a person to assert that their gender identity is a sex other than that defined for the purposes of accessing places or services restricted on the basis of sex. Now, the way we can really fix the bathrooms is to allow a bathroom to be labeled women only or men only, as long as there's some that are a more permissive sign where those who may be questioned or those like me who don't actually personally care that much about who else is in the bathroom with me can go and choose the ones that just have the general angle. But if it says women only, people like my friend who was raped in the bathroom should be able to know that it's only women that are going into that room. If we narrow it only into those cases and we make it so that some of these can be separate to validate that lived experience of these women, I think we can get to a place where maybe not everybody's fully happy, but maybe we can all live with it. And maybe we can recognize that, maybe we can just move forward and recognize that the lived experiences of everybody are important. And the last thing that I do want to add is I had left out the indecent exposure issue. When you're dealing with locker rooms, the biggest issue is when a woman or a girl is in a bathroom, in a locker room changing, and they're exposed to a penis. It should be considered indecent exposure to expose the genitals that are not consistent with that sex in that changing room or in a massage room or somewhere else, for that to be indecent exposure. Because right now you can change and it's not considered indecent exposure. Look, I'm looking to find a place where we can start moving past these debates while recognizing the lived experiences of both trans women and men and women and men, and that our little girls won't be in a locker room with somebody exposing their penis, whether it's a man for an improper purpose or a trans woman who is still intact. So I would ask that you look closely at those sections 2, 3, 4, and 9 and see how that's something that really can help move us forward in solutions, as opposed to fighting over the language. And the last thing that I will add is, I don't know if any of you have heard about how we have birth control for mice. Came out of a great hormone lab where my husband actually trained for a while. So yeah, he's deep in the weeds, a lot of this hormonal stuff. And so that's why I was able to bring both him and other expertise to get this precise medical language. And with that, I'll take any questions.
All right, questions, Representative Smith.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I'm violating my rule of just listening to all of you today. Are you saying that there's a difference in potential danger from individuals whose birth certificates say they are male as compared with transgender?
Thank you for the question. If you're talking about the potential for penetrative rape with a penis, that is only possible from a male. That is one of the cases, and that's one of the scenarios. But also, you would look to something where you have bone density or structure. You may have something like wrestling where it's weight classes, and it's something that can be done in an area. There's other ones because there are physiological developments that are different in normal physiology. that which your average person undergoes, where there are reasons of safety to do that. I would also say that if there is an inmate who does have a penis who is raping their cellmate, that is an issue of safety. It's not always what happens. I would say that most trans women don't do that, but some do.
Thank you.
Other questions for this witness? Representative Romber.
Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. I understand that you pointed out several sections you feel are important in the bill. I don't think you focused on Section 10, which is the criminalization part of the bill that would criminalize trespass. If somebody I guess it's target any man who shall willfully enter an area or access a service restricted to female shall be guilty of a trespass violation. Can you speak more about why you feel like that's is that an important part of the bill? Can you speak about that section?
I think there needs to be something that's done for somebody, a malicious actor or somebody like me when I went into the Costco bathroom who didn't truly believe that. And there needs to be some enforcement, but I didn't say that that was one of the things that I thought was absolutely necessary to move forward with. And if the committee decides to move forward without Section 10, I'll be fine with that.
Thank you.
Other questions for this witness? Oh, yeah. Oops, I'm sorry. Representative Tur.
Thanks. And thanks for taking the question. So let me start off and say, for all of the other bills that don't define biological sex, this bill shows why that's so difficult. And I'll explain. So I do see that you went initially with the definition of the SRY gene. So even going down below the chromosomal level down to the genetic level, and there's body of evidence that says that gene is somewhat determinative. But then it goes on and lists other things. And at the end of that sentence where the SRY chromosome is mentioned or section, we're on line 10 of page 1, it says to remove the need for genetic testing, those persons who do not meet the legal definition of female will be considered male. And I wasn't sure what legal definition that is. I do see later on that there is a section, which I'm struggling to find. On the top of page 2, there is a section that says female is generally defined as. So I don't know if those are meant to refer to each other or not, but could you clarify? Because it brings in various other elements other than the gene that's initially mentioned. And I was just curious how those are harmonized in this.
Thank you very much for that question. If you believe the science, there is only one known time when there is a functional SRY gene expressed during fetal development where a person would be considered genetically female by anything other than the expression of the SRY gene. That is the case of the 46,XX/46,XY scenario with functional ovarian tissue, because if you have the genetic makeup without the ovarian tissue. The reason I'm slicing it that closely is because that is what the science and the data say, that is where right now, I'm not sure if you're aware, but medicine acts differently in females and males. And when you're looking at clinical research and the way that drugs are developed, that is a way that it is cut, unless you simply exclude intersex people from the clinical studies, which I think is inappropriate, because I think that everybody should have good medical care. The reason why it says that if you do not meet the definition of female, you meet the definition of male, is because there may be other genetic modifications that are discovered. And more clearly, the females are the weaker sex. We are the weaker sex. We are the ones who, I recognize that sometimes men are sexually assaulted and sometimes men are raped, but women are the ones who, by far and large, are not as strong, not as large as men, and are not as successful as fighting off their attacker without something to even the playing field. As the weaker sex, we need those protections.
Can I?
Follow up?
Yes, please. Thanks. So maybe it got muddled up because I brought a lot of things into that question. I guess what I was really first wanted to focus on is because obviously the definitions here are only as good as the way that the definitions are used in practical sense. And so it basically implies the SRY gene first, and then And then it goes on to say that to remove the need for genetic testing, persons who do not meet the legal definition of female. And so that's the piece I really wanted to look at first, which is, if it's not the SRY gene, where do we define the legal definition of female? And that was where I looked at that next definition on the next page, which then gets into reproductive systems that could have produced certain characteristics. And so there is that's different than the SRY gene. And so I'm curious, how would anyone know either that you have that gene or that you have a functional set of reproductive organs, I guess?
Well, thank you for the question. Usually when we go to our checkups, we know whether or not that's one of the things that's determined. When you're taking a child to go for their checkups, you make sure that the son's testes have descended in the normal way. Otherwise, you look into it to see if there's something so that we can preserve their fertility. There are absolutely times when somebody doesn't present in the normal way, but a good doctor will follow up with a lot of that. That's why perhaps it may be best to carve that out where the specifically defined becomes a subparagraph under 1, but my legal definition is female is defined as an individual. You can get rid of the generally. Female is defined as an individual with a reproductive system of the type in which normal function produces ova. Period. And then clarify with those other ones so that we're not fighting in those details about which intersex people would be in which category. Because there are absolutely intersex people that you would not know are not female without looking at them, without looking at their genetics. This is a way to do that because, quite honestly, either we can go with the generally accepted stereotypical one, which I don't like because I'm not a fan of stereotypes, or we can go with the scientific one and allow us to talk about the type that normally produces ova. And I think most of us know what the general presentation is there.
And so
Other questions for this witness?
Can I have just one more, please?
Representative Brooks.
No, okay.
Go ahead, one more.
Thank you. Sorry. So just to follow out the logic of why I was asking that, and it pertains to sort of what we've heard on the last couple of bills, I guess the question is still, if that is true, when entering a bathroom, what would someone be expected to produce in order to document this? Because obviously, in order to move from subjective definitions to objective scientific definitions, it could have been something genetic that you would have to be able to say. And this says it would have to be something that your doctor might have verified in your medical history, but either of those would be a lot to share in this circumstance. Is that sort of what you're envisioning, or how do you see that playing out?
Thank you for the question. What I'm envisioning is that in general things, we're in general society, nobody really knows anybody. We continue with the honor system as we have, but if somebody like myself asserts that they're male so they can go in the room that's not closed, that's something where you can kick me out because I was doing the wrong thing. If you have somebody who's doing that, then you have that practice. But if you're in a situation in a work area where there's somebody who it's not just been the gender identity, but it's been another pattern of issues, and for some reason the person doesn't lose their employment for other harassment, there can be a process. So it's difficult, but the point is there needs to be some mechanism where you can come to a definitive decision on that. The other question too is if you have somebody, if you can't define what a woman is, then we can offer women, infants, and children food stamps to a man. Do we want to do that?
I'm sorry, the questions are asked by the members of the committee, not by the witness. Next question, there was a question for Representative Birch.
Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. Just to follow up on your response to the last question, you say if a biological male, let's say, goes into a women's bathroom, you can throw them out, but your bill would allow them to be criminally prosecuted. Is that correct?
As I said before, I think that we can get by without Section 10, but I do think that if somebody goes into a women's bathroom and is showing everybody a penis, they probably shouldn't be in there because bathrooms should be private, even within the stalls.
I believe if
Follow up?
Yeah, not technically a follow-up, but the real question I wanted to ask was about inmates and in jails. Given the testimony that we have heard, that the incidents of violence involving people presenting as women being in all-male prison environment is extremely high. What would you say about do you have a concern about that data that shows how prevalent it is that those individuals are attacked violently within the prison context?
Thank you for the question. And actually, this, if I can refer back to Representative Turs, this is one of those places where it may make sense to get to that testing if you need to definitively determine somebody's sex in one of these situations. The idea that the experience of women who are being assaulted in the women's prison by transgender women is being dismissed because there is also violence against trans women in the men's prison ignores the threats to women in the women's prison. If we can't have a differentiation, we can't have a way to protect those women. And quite frankly, the question is, how often are women reporting that? Because do they believe that those people that maybe a nurse that they might be reporting a sexual assault to, because I know at least when rape kits happen, you go through a nurse and through a sexual assault nurse. If they believe that the nurse that they're speaking to might belittle them and belittle their experience because of their own preconceived notions, would you expect women to be reporting that if they end up punished because they're not believed? Sorry, and I didn't mean to be asking a question again. Usually my committees are more limited in how aggressive the questions are to the people asking questions, and more permissive on the questions back and
Other
forth.
questions for this witness? Yes, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. I have a question about page 1, lines 23 through 29, where you're talking about willful trespass regarding for men accessing female spaces, unless it's like a male child or a male that has a caregiver. I'm thinking about the circumstance where you have a dad with a potty training female toddler, or a toddler who is in, before school age, where they can't handle their bathroom needs by themselves. Would this be a willful trespass if a single father accompanied his 3 or 4-year-old daughter into the bathroom, a female bathroom, because they felt it was safer for their girl child than taking them into the men's room, which might have open urinals or be gross?
Well, thank you for the question. I have actually heard from people that clean bathrooms that men aren't quite as gross as women are. So maybe it's actually cleaner in the men's room. But when you look at the situation, and the other part is I was saying that we can take that section out. But I traveled cross country and I went through a couple different bathrooms. And a man did walk in with his young children into an in-and-out bathroom in Flagstaff, Arizona. And there was a palpable feel of concern and fear from all of the women when they heard a very masculine voice in that room. That actually did inform and made me realize that the idea of that man probably should be taking his daughter into that men's room with him, or going to a family bathroom, because most of them do have family bathrooms. But yes.
All right. Other questions for this witness? Representative Tur.
Sorry, I do have a number of questions on the bill, so sorry to keep coming back. I wanted to follow up on where you started with the 21:3, because that's referenced multiple places throughout this bill. It's also referenced in some of the other bills we're hearing today. And I read it the way I think I heard you describe it, which is that it doesn't actually define a gender at all. It basically defines gender neutrality. The way that the language reads, which I can quote if you'd like. But it says basically, it shall be unlawful for any person to assert that their gender identity is a sex other than that defined in 21:3. So, and I'm on bottom of page 5. So basically, is it sort of defining that the the criminality, I guess, of this would be contingent upon the gender as defined in that part of the law that specifically omits the ability to classify or asserts that gender is neutral. Sorry, does that make sense? Do you see the problem I'm having?
Actually, you identified a place where we can clarify the language. If that section, that paragraph 2 instead reads, "It shall be unlawful for any person to assert that their gender identity is female for the purposes of accessing places or space services restricted to the female sex." That would be very clear.
All right, other questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm just trying to be nice to the guys by having it go both ways.
Next, I'm going to call on Representative Alice Wade, and again, I'm going to go back to the 2-minute rule for anyone other than the sponsor.
Hello, once again, members of the Judiciary Committee. For the record, I am Representative Alice Wade, representing Dover Ward 2. First off, I can tell you for the record, men's restrooms are far grosser from experience, unfortunately, I know. But under this bill, I would have committed trespass this morning by just using the restroom like normal, a couple doors down. Nobody else was there. It was just me. Nothing happened. Harassment is harassment. Assault is assault. These are already crimes. These are already things that can be prosecuted. All this bill is doing is, if somebody is already doing that bad behavior, it just tacks a trespassing charge on top of it. It doesn't protect people the way it claims to. And I'll also point you to page 5, line 4. It says, "Facilities labeled women or girls shall be considered sex-separated areas for the purposes of willful trespass." Facilities. All facilities. Private businesses, public businesses, the State House, this building, anywhere. It doesn't restrict it to, a facility may or may not choose to do that. It mandates it. And it would mandate willful trespass for people not committing any crimes. No crimes at all, just using the facility. And I hate having to come back here. Time after time after time. There are 6 of these bills this year. Just in New Hampshire, there are dozens and dozens more nationwide. When does it stop? These attacks are baseless. They are based on nothing. They are classifying an entire class of people as somehow violating safety and privacy. If I am uncomfortable with somebody else in any public space, I don't get to decide whether they have access to it.
Time is up.
Thank you very much.
Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
I just, if anyone has pink cards, could they bring them over here? They can,
Yes.
they
give
can
the
pass down easier from that side
Thank
than over there. Thank you.
All right, next I'm going to call on Claire Abernathy, and Ann Zumholtz will be on deck.
Hello again. Before I get into the substance of my testimony, I'd like to say that multiple people sitting behind me have jeered at me and laughed at me while I described being sexually assaulted and mocked me as I've moved around the room. And I'd appreciate if we could enforce a level of respect and decorum from both sides of these issues. As you heard before, my name is Claire and I'm a detransitioner. I was deeply traumatized by a lack of enforcement of single-sex spaces in the schools I attended. I was not protected by being allowed to use boys' spaces, as the opponents of this bill would have you believe. I was harmed as any reasonable adult could have foreseen. A bill like this could have protected me, and failing to protect not only the girls who would be forced to share accommodations with boys who claim trans identities, but the trans-identified girls like I was, who are also put in danger when sharing intimate spaces with males, is nothing less than cruel. Recent polling by Pew Research Center, which skews heavily Democrat, shows that the majority of Americans support legislation like this. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much. Ann Zumwalt, please, and next on is Representative Alexandra Murray. Will be on deck.
Good morning. My name is Ann Zumwalt. I am a associate professor at Boston University School of Medicine, and I'm here to speak against the bill. I have to say first that my testimony does not reflect that of my employer, Boston University, but it does reflect my 20 years of experience as an anatomist with a particular expertise in the reproductive system. I want to start by sharing the story of Callie, a girl with androgen insensitivity syndrome. In this syndrome, genetically male individuals with functional SRY genes, as is written in the legislation, have tissue that is not responsive to male hormones. This means that when they are developing in utero, which, before birth, their body does not develop the male external organs, and therefore they have female external organs. Baby is born, they appear to be female, raised as a girl. And only later probably find out that they have this genetic difference. So by the line of this bill, Callie would be defined as a male, forced to use male facilities, and be subject to criminal penalties just for having a genetic difference. So my point of telling you this story is that any legislation that attempts to define sex into just two categories is essentially bound to leave somebody out. That's because that approach contradicts essentially everything we know about the science of categorizing sex. You can categorize it anatomically, genetically, hormonally, or any combination of those. And what we know is that at every one of those levels, we have the typical male pattern and the typical female pattern. And then we have people who do not fit within those two patterns. We also have people in whom those different levels do not match, as you saw with the Callie example. So
I'm sorry, ma'am, your time is up.
okay, so my final point is there's no single factor or combination of factors that can adequately be used to categorize sex into just two sexes.
All right,
Thank
thank you.
you.
Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next, Representative Alessandra Murray, and on deck will be Simon Amaya Price. Representative?
Thank you, Honorable Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Alessandra Rodriguez Murray. I represent Hillsborough District 20, which is Manchester Ward 9. And I'm here today to speak in opposition to HB 1442. Some of you may have been present for my unanimous consent remarks after session yesterday. In those remarks, I read a quote that was displayed on a sign outside of this building. With the legislation that's been introduced, even if it doesn't pass, it creates an environment that's permissive of anger and vitriol towards our community. That quote has stayed with me because we are witnessing that environment take shape in real time in this room. Rather than hearing data that substantiates the need for this legislation, we are hearing sweeping condemnations of transgender people, rhetoric that paints an entire community as inherently dangerous. Bills like HB 1442 do not exist in a vacuum. They create a sanctioned platform for suspicion, fear, and hostility toward a small and already vulnerable group of Granite Staters. And the facts simply do not support the narrative being advanced. Transgender women are significantly more likely to be victims of violence than cisgender women. Research consistently shows that transgender individuals experience violent victimization at rates more than 4 times higher than cisgender people. Transgender women, particularly transgender women of color, face the highest risk and account for the majority of fatal violence against transgender people nationwide. In public bathrooms specifically, the data is clear. Transgender people are far more likely to be harassed, denied access, or assaulted than anyone else. One report found that 68% of transgender people experience verbal harassment and 9% experience physical assault in a public restroom in a single year. There is no credible evidence that allowing transgender people to use restrooms consistent with their gender identity increases safety risks. In fact, bathroom restrictions increase their vulnerability. HB 1442 is premised on the idea that the mere presence...
Your time is up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Simon Amaya Price, and on deck will be Pasha Roberts.
Good afternoon, committee. Thank you for continuing to hear me speak. My name is Simon Amaya Price, and I would like to announce very proudly to everyone here that I am coming out as a transgender woman for the duration of this testimony and any questions. I know, I'm very brave. Bathrooms are currently done on an honor basis. Right now, there's one sign that says men, and for the other bathroom, it says women. There is no way to verify someone's gender identity. It isn't on your birth certificate, driver's license, or passport. There is no one in the bathroom asking me what my gender identity is. If this bill is enacted, in the great majority of situations, it would continue to be an honor system. With probable cause, owners of a business or other authority figures may ask for ID. As a transgender woman, I support all of the bills heard today. Me and other reasonable transgender women all understand that we do not magically change sex by declaring our identities or going through medical transition. The rest of the transgender women here are giving people like me a bad name. I heard another trans person say today that it is impossible to test for someone's sex or define sex in the first place. Just because you don't understand how it works doesn't mean it's possible. The male sex is the body plan that produces sperm, and the female sex is the body plan that produces the large gamete, which are the eggs. This applies to all species that reproduce through two gametes of differing size, including humans. Based on this definition, we know whether an organism is male or female by looking at the sexual body plan, the structures that produce and release either gamete type. For human males, it includes testes, epididymis, vas deferens, seminal vesicle, and penis. For human females, it includes the ovaries, fallopian tubes, uterus, cervix, and vagina. Some species have the male and female roles in a single individual, but in humans, individuals are either male or female throughout their entire life cycle, a sexual system known as gonocronism. There are no reported or recorded incidences of human hermaphrodites. There are a variety of ways which sexual development is determined across sexually dimorphic species.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Time is up. Thank you. Questions for this witness? Seeing none.
Thank you very much.
Asha Roberts, and on deck will be Chris Urkel.
Okay, greetings, and I'm going to go fast. I'm Pasha Roberts. I live in Wilmette, New Hampshire. I'm on the board of 623 Equality, speaking in opposition to 1442. I appreciate your attention to intersex people such as myself, but there are over 80 genes and many other factors that determine sexual differentiation. There is no silver bullet, no single factor, and SRY is definitely not that. The doctors and attached articles will walk through science, but I will present to you a supermodel, Hannah Gabby Odell. Here's a picture of her on the cover of Vogue. With no modification, she is everything you'd expect in a woman externally, including in the pants. She's intersex, she has XY, and she would have an SRY gene on her Y chromosome. There is something wrong with this law if you want a woman born like this in the men's room. The Olympics stopped testing the SRY gene in 2000 because it had too many false readings. The geneticist who discovered the SRY, Andrew Sinclair, has repeatedly urged that SRY never be used for sex categorization. It is well known that many men lose their Y chromosome as they age. Here are two medical articles describing the mechanisms and outcomes. 40% of men over 60 are missing their Y chromosome, and rising to 57% at age 90. This means by the letter of this bill, they are allowed in the ladies' room. This is a huge oversight. There is no single testable factor that determines sex. The SRY gene was disproven and discontinued a quarter century ago. There is no reason for New Hampshire to repeat that mistake. Any test that involves a Y chromosome ignores the fact that Y goes away with age. Think about this. This bill would send supermodels to the men's room and make it legal for half of older men to use the women's room. I urge you to mark this bill as inexpedient to legislate. If you have medical questions, we have a medical professor from a top medical school sitting right behind me.
Thank you. Questions for this witness? Seeing none. Chris Urkel, and on deck is David Trumbull.
Thank you, Chair Lynn. Again, I'm Chris Urchel with GLBTQ Legal Advocates and Defenders, and I'm here in opposition to this bill. I just want to take one moment to say I was really grateful to hear the sponsor of this bill, Rep. Leon, say that she is happy to get rid of the criminalization portion of the legislation. I hope this committee would do the same, because it is exceptionally cruel to target transgender people with with criminalization just for using the bathroom. I would like to highlight what Representative Murray was talking about earlier to the committee. She spoke really eloquently about the harm that transgender people experience when they're excluded from using restrooms and how that impacts their lives. I also just want to focus a little bit on the issue of sexual assault. There has been an inherent assumption that allowing transgender people to use bathrooms is connected in any way to increased incidents of sexual assault. And this is an issue that's been researched. There is data, there's people who have studied it, and research shows that there is no change in incidents of sexual assault when there are protections for transgender people who want to use the bathroom. So that is the one thing I want to make sure that I get across, is that there is zero evidence, after research has been conducted, there's zero evidence to support that protections for transgender people have anything to do with increased sexual assault in bathrooms. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to
Questions
take
for
them.
this witness? Representative Birch.
Thank you. I'm sure you've been listening to earlier testimony, because I've seen you there, and we hear the term probable cause thrown around a lot. And my background was criminal law, but I'm wondering if you could explain that we hear that, oh, nobody will be bothered unless there's probable cause to believe that they might be in a bathroom for the whatever. Could you explain the probable cause is more than just, I have a hunch?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a really great question. Thank you for asking it. For one thing, I don't see anything in this bill or any of the other bills that actually says that probable cause is required before questioning someone's gender. That is I don't see where it's implied or anything. But probable cause, and also probable cause is a standard that's usually police officers, right? They need probable cause in order to essentially to violate your rights under the Fourth and Fifth Amendment, right? That means that, before any kind of search or seizure can happen on a person's body, they need to have, a police officer needs to have probable cause to suspect that the person has committed a crime. That's a high standard, right? That means that there has to be observations that actually suggest things that a police officer can then go on the stand and defend later and say, yes, I had these reasons that I documented for why I thought it was appropriate to stop this person and to search this person without a warrant. And so that's, typically how probable cause works in the criminal context. And again, there's nothing in any of this proposed legislation that suggests a standard of probable cause. So I'm not sure where that term keeps coming from.
All right. Other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, David Trumbull, and on deck will be Amy Teravaki. I hope I'm pronouncing that right this time. Sorry if I haven't.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I'm David Trumbull from Ware, and I oppose this bill. The biggest problem with this bill is that it wants you to believe that there's only two options. This binary definition of biological sex. That doesn't comport with reality. I'm not a scientist on this, but I've been reading about this for hours and hours. And what I keep reading when I'm looking up intersex is that it's not a binary option. Reality is a continuum. Most people are clearly identifiable in one or the other, but it's like this. And in between, there's an area that is intersex. It's real. There's 40 different possible combinations. I realize this bill attempts to give you one or two examples and says, that's it. We've defined the whole intersex issue. Now we're done with that. Now we can get on with the rest of our agenda. But that's not real. You had a doctor who up here was telling you that it's not real. Unfortunately, she was only limited to 2 minutes. I urge you, before you vote on this bill, to go home and spend 3 or 4 or 5 hours reading about intersex and make sure you know something about it. And if you do spend that amount of time, you'll realize that it's not binary. This bill tries to take something that's not real and put it into law. The United Nations has an intersex rights resolution. I've been reading advocates who are human rights attorneys in this field who are saying that these wave of bills in the U.S. that have exceptions for intersex people are not protections. They are rather permission to continue harmful practices based on the rigid idea that male and female, and yielding to social pressure to make bodies conform into the binary type. The second group that gets left out of this is transgender people, because the way this bill is written, they no longer, their rights are not protected either. This bill wants you to believe there's a binary. It doesn't solve the definition problem that we went through in the previous bills. You are going to be taking entire groups of people and saying their civil rights don't exist in this
Your
state.
time is up, sir. Thank you. Questions for this witness? Seeing none? Thank you. Next is Amy no, yeah, Amy. And on deck will be Jennifer Smith. A much easier name to pronounce. Sorry.
It's quite all right. Amy Teravecchia, again, 603 Equality. I'm going to be sharing some words today from Esther Leidoff, who could not be here today to submit testimony in person. I do have some written testimony I can hand out. Esther is the founder and president of MRKH Intersex Organization, which is the oldest intersex organization in the U.S., based in Boston, Massachusetts. So they're testifying in opposition to HB 1442 and HB 1447, which we'll get to later. So I'm going to read from Esther's testimony. I was born with typical female chromosomes and, based on external appearance, assigned female at birth. When my intersex traits appeared in my teens, I was suddenly not female enough. I was put in the path of medical correction and subjected to surgeries I didn't want or need to accommodate sexual standards of my assigned sex. Essentially, I was assigned female at birth by the same standards that decided that I wasn't an acceptable female 13 years later. Rather than alter the paperwork, they altered my body, resulting in a lifetime of physical and emotional harm. The premise that physical sex and gender are binary is simply outdated. We have gained volumes of understanding about sex and gender and how they interact in the last decade alone, and variations in reproductive and sex anatomy are just as natural as the variations in other parts of our anatomy, such as height, physical stature, skin tone, etc. Forcing people to lie on legal documents by restricting sex and gender is systemic erasure. In the number of people, 3 to 5% intersex, 1% non-binary, 1% trans of the population who will now need to lie to get their documents in order to access public restrooms will bring the integrity of those very documents into question for everyone. As an intersex person, I will not be able to use the restroom in New Hampshire without breaking the law. The possibility that my gender identity may become unlawful by limiting gender to match sex status feels very much like discrimination based on my sex and my gender. Forcing people to disseminate their medical records to prove they have a right to self-identify seems like sexual intimidation. Forcing prisoners to cohabitate in mixed sex spaces will put people in danger.
Thank you. Your time is up. Questions for this witness? Seeing none, Jennifer Smith, and on deck will be Cameron Moons.
So thank you. Most of what has been on my mind has been covered very extensively. Happy to take further questions as a medical doctor, public health researcher as well. And what I really want to do is just say, hey, please, this is just not right. You will drive even more people out of the state, including their entire families. I know multiple families who have left this state or are planning to because of the prevalence of this kind of legislation that affects their children. I'm quite sure that several of us will leave because of legislation like this, if it were to pass and get signed by the governor. Thank God, so far, she seems to not think this makes sense. Anyway, you know, I've been very careful about who I am, and I realized that most people would not accept it long ago, and so I did not come out publicly, despite having transitioned privately more than 25 years ago, until after I retired and same-gender marriage became legal. And I couldn't even approach the thought of full gender transition. I was hormonally not male for a long time, but you're going to make my life miserable if you pass this kind of thing. It just is not sensible, and it puts me at risk, too, if I do stay and you were to throw me into a prison because of some alleged behavior and throw me into a male prison. You know, please, people, think. We exist. We're real. Please think about that.
Thank you very much.
Happy to take questions.
Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much. Cameron Moons, and on deck is Kelly Twist.
All right. So again, my name is Cameron Munns. I'm a Manchester resident for almost 40 years, I'd say. So the prime sponsor had stated that she doesn't like stereotypes and would like to go with scientific definitions. But in that case, I just am wondering why it's anyone's privilege to know what chromosomes someone has, or SRY genes, or what's on their birth certificate. So that's my first question, is just whose right is it? She also doesn't want to go with stereotypes. So in that case, it would be great if legislators could be more forthcoming with why these bills are actually here, which is to be able to lawfully say, ew, you're icky and I don't like you, so I'm going to kick you out of public space. I certainly do not diminish anyone else's trauma that they have been through, nor would I ever invalidate lived experiences. I also have lived experiences. We do live in, a public society where we're going to be interacting with people. So in that case, I'm wondering if all taxi drivers or Uber drivers should be cisgender women, so that we can, fix that, right? So it's going to happen. If no one is doing anything wrong to you, you should have no right to question who they are based on these stereotypes. The prime sponsor also said that most transgender folks are not, perpetrators, whatever, but some do. Again, I would say that is the same thing for Catholic priests, Boy Scout guys, whatever. Am I wrong, Representative Perez? No. Okay. So in that case, I would just assume that we would also want to deal with those folks as well, if we're going to pigeonhole and kind of blame one community over another. It could at least be.
Time is up.
Sorry, you say, sir?
Okay.
I have a
vagina. Sorry. Okay. Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Perez, you had a question.
My response was my shock that those were brought up only. Thank you.
It's my shock that happens.
Other questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much. Kelly Twist, and on deck will be Reed Riscapo.
Good morning again, Kelly Twist. I rise to oppose this bill. Unlike earlier proposals that primarily permit discrimination for certain classifications, this bill goes much further. It redefines sex across New Hampshire statutory law, mandates sex-based separation policies for public entities, expands those policies into sleeping quarters like dorms, and explicitly shields them from discrimination claims. That represents a significant shift in how civil rights operate in this state. From a legal standpoint, the biggest concern is equal protection. This bill creates broad classifications affecting access to facilities, programs, and services without identifying a demonstrated problem in New Hampshire that requires this level of statutory intervention. Courts have consistently required that classifications based on biological traits have clear justification and careful tailoring. This bill does neither. I had a lot more to say, but most of this was kind of covered by everybody else. But I guess what I would like to say is I wish that I could ask you a question and how you think this law would be interpreted in any sort of logical way. It's just circular. It just defines sex as needing a birth certificate that most people will have that reflect their gender at birth, but that's not true. It doesn't mention your ID, which also could reflect your birth gender or not your birth gender. And then it goes on to chromosomes. So now are we going to require chromosome testing for every person so that they can have a card so they can go into the ladies' room? Like it's ridiculous. This bill cannot be enforced. And I don't think you even want it to be. I think you're just trying to make the point that we do not want transgender people in this state. That's what you're trying to do, because this is never going to pass. You can pass it. I know you will. The Senate will pass it. The House will pass it. It's going to get vetoed. And if it goes through, it's going to get challenged in courts. And you know this. You know this. There's
Thank you
no
very much.
way to
Your-
logically do this.
Your time is up. Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you. Reed Riscapo, and on deck is Sarah Smith.
Thank you for hearing me today. My name is Reed Piscopo. Sorry, my handwriting is
I'm
not
sorry.
the best. It is okay.
Sorry about that.
I am currently not a resident of the state. I currently live in Massachusetts, but for the first 21 years of my life, New Hampshire has been my home. I've gone through your state education system. My undergraduate degree is from Plymouth State University. This is where my parents live, where my in-laws live, where my brother has started his family. I still very much consider myself tied to New Hampshire. Bills like this not only restrict the people living here today, but they restrict the people who are looking to come in and spend time with their families. A bill like this, I will skip what I was normally going to say, but a bill like this will stop me from feeling comfortable to go out with my family when I am here visiting. I don't think you want me in the women's restroom. That is where this bill will be asking me to go. If I were to walk into the women's restroom, I would be told that I am one of the people claiming to be a woman because I am a cisgender man and that I am trying to sexually assault them. If you went through with a genital check, you would very quickly change your mind on that. If you looked at my birth certificate, you would very quickly change your mind on that. So what you're telling me is stop coming to this state. Stop spending my money here. Stop considering the state a place for me to step foot. Stop seeing my family. Ask them to always travel to me instead. You're going to ask that of a lot of people. And from a purely fiscal stance, what does that do to the state of New Hampshire's financials? Lots of these bills say they have no financial impact, yet they have tons of financial impact on tourist revenue, on places that would now have to consider putting in gender-neutral spaces, on if, as many others have mentioned, we are now suddenly going to need genetic testing. Genetic testing is not covered by most medical insurance. So where is that money coming from? The last thing I would like to leave you with is that New Hampshire's state motto is live free or die. The man who said those words was a distinguished Revolutionary War hero. His name was General John Stark.
So your time is up, sir. Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much. Sarah Smith, and on deck is Rebecca Hoskins.
Good afternoon. Thank you for taking my testimony. My name is Sarah Smith. I'm interested in this bill as a cisgender woman, wondering how will such a thing be enforced? Will there be people checking us as we go in and out of the bathroom? Will it be based on our appearance? Because sometimes people just appear different. And then what do you do? What do you do? They think we've had as many instances of cisgendered women being actually examined to find out whether they belong in this place. I think we need to take a step back and just stop thinking about how we can make people disappear that we don't like. And talk about that this state needs to welcome everyone. I think that if something like this passes, the word will get out around that New Hampshire will discriminate against you if you appear different, and a lot of people will stay away. They won't want to face that. They won't want to go skiing and have to be questioned when they go to the locker room or the bathroom. I think it could have a big effect on everyone. It's not just about who's transgender, but now you're judging everyone based on their appearance, and you're going to be like, well, that the hair's too short. That can't be right. I think for a legislature which prides itself on independence and freedom, to be doing this kind of policing on people is really, I'll just use the word ironic.
Thank you very much. Your time is up. Thank you. Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next, Rebecca Hoskins, and on deck is Jamie Grasso. Rebecca Hoskins? All right, and Rebecca Hoskins is not here. Then I'm going to call on Jamie Grasso, please.
Hi, my name. Excuse me. Hi, my name is Jamie Grasso. I'm a resident of Provincetown, Massachusetts. I am here in opposition to this bill and to all the bills that attack trans people. I'm a United States veteran. I served in the United States Marine Corps honorably for years, and I protected every person in this room. All of your rights, no matter what your political background was, no matter what your gender was. Okay? As a society, I expect the same in return, and I am a trans person. These bills make my life incredibly dangerous. I can no longer travel to Florida. I can no longer travel to Texas. By these bills passing, I would be required to use a women's room. Can you imagine this guy? That's not going to play well. In Texas, I can be put in jail and charged $10,000 for not using the women's room because biologically I am female, and that's ridiculous. I would encourage you to consider the real ramifications, how this affects real people like me, and to vote against this bill because it does real harm. I'm also, my background is in architecture. I'm a pre-licensed architect. I went to school at UNH as an undergrad, and I left, and I loved UNH. It was awesome. But I left New Hampshire because there were a lot of hate crimes happening to queer people in New Hampshire at the time. And I moved to Massachusetts, where I went on to spend $300,000 on my graduate education. So that's $300,000 I did not spend in New Hampshire. My company that I work for is one town over the border in Massachusetts because they don't believe in policies like this, and they bring in millions of dollars a year. This does have a financial impact. We are choosing not to spend our money here because of it. I'm going to be out of time, so I thank you.
Thank you. Questions for this witness? Seeing none. Ty Thompson, please.
Thank you. Ty Thompson, Nottingham, New Hampshire. My pronouns are they, them. I'm reading testimony provided today by a doctor who could not be physically with us in this building. Dr. Susan Stred from Syracuse, New York. She's a board-certified physician and professor in pediatric endocrinology with 30 years of experience. She writes, one of my primary focus areas was the diagnosis and treatment of young people with intersex variations, and my work continues now to educate other physicians, medical trainees on variations in sex characteristics and how to provide optimal care for these individuals. Chromosomes, genetics, hormones, and the intrauterine environment during a pregnancy have complex interplay, informing the anatomy and composition of each human. There are at least 80 different genes already identified which participate in sex determination during fetal life. The vast majority of them do not. She's missing word, but on the X and Y chromosomes, and the pace of scientific discovery adds more to the list each year. It was surprising to see the legislature's focus on the SRY gene. There are so many genetic, environmental, and hormonal factors that go into making someone male or female that there is simply no way to legislate sex assignment or boil it down to a simple test. No single gene or factor can be used to categorize a human as male or female, not anatomy, not chromosomes, not eggs or sperm, not testosterone, and not the SRY gene. In a sense, none of this biology should matter in determining a gender of an individual. That said, it is extremely dangerous to rely on a simplistic understanding of this established science when crafting restrictive and punitive legislation. Would every girl or woman moving to the state have to carry their birth certificate with them at every rest stop on the highway? Will examination of the birth certificate become part of every human resources hiring evaluation or every judicial sentence hearing?
Thank you. Thank you. Your time is up.
Thank you.
Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you. Next, I have Representative Joseph Barton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll keep this short for the members. I know it's been a long day. There are only two genders, and historically, we didn't have gender reassignment 100 years ago. There was none of this confusion. I fully support limiting the use of certain facilities on the basis of the God-given assigned sex. And trying to change that, you can't change your DNA. It just becomes, an issue of confusion, and it's not an issue of actual biological gender. So with that, I support the legislation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
All right. Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much, sir.
Thanks.
I believe that I do not have any I know I don't have any other cards on HB 1442. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard? Yes, did you fill out a card?
I thought I handed it in.
You probably handed it in for the other. Sir, come on up.
Can you just fill it out afterwards? Sure.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, thank you for listening to me again. The first thing I just want to mention is that I'm highly offended by the original sponsor of this bill saying that nurses, which is one of the highest respected professions, would be unprofessional when dealing with somebody who's been in a sexual assault situation. The next thing I'm going to say is that I'm going to repeat some people. We're going to talk about the SRY gene again, because there's something called androgen insensitivity syndrome, and there's also something called de la Chapelle syndrome. And in these situations, for instance, typically with the de la Chapelle syndrome, typically they have a penis and testes. They're typically infertile because they don't produce sperm. Some have ambiguous genitalia, such as a micropenis or a urethral opening that is on the underside of their penis, and they have undescended testes. Also, they also may have what's called, forgive me if I'm pronouncing this wrong, Mullerian remnants, which are pieces of undeveloped female tissue within their internal reproductive system. The androgen insensitivity syndrome, there are different, it appears to be 3 different types. The complete one is where they have external female genitalia and have undescended testes instead of ovaries or a womb. Partial, they may have a vagina, penis, or ambiguous genitalia. And in mild cases, they typically have a penis and a scrotum, but may develop infertility and breasts during puberty. And in these situations as well, that SRY gene, which is typically found on the Y chromosome.
Thank you, ma'am. Your time is up.
Okay, thank you very much.
You. Questions for this witness? Seeing none, Andrea Lucas, please.
Thank you for hearing my testimony. Never done this before, so I'm slightly terrified. But I'm hearing a lot about safety and safety concerns today, and I must say that as a New Hampshire native of 40 years, I didn't realize that all of our public bathrooms were just such a hotbed for sexual depravity here. And I must have missed the memo, and I haven't heard about it in WMUR or the Union Leader or anything, so I'm a little surprised, to be honest. And if safety is the concern, then why have I not heard bills increasing the penalties for sexual assault or expediting the processing of rape kits and increasing access to that? Why have I not heard any bills supporting and increasing services for survivors? All of these bills are truly about protection and safety, then it shouldn't be focused on the imagined and hyperbolized supposed offenders, and instead focus on behavior, because we all know that behavior can be enacted by anyone. Hyper-focusing on less than 1% of the population and the people that they consist of that, people seem to just be really hell-bent on misunderstanding that population. And it's a beautiful diversionary tactic to shift the focus away from the fact that the hard truth is that the people who do perpetuate sexual harassment and assault walk among us in far more insidious forms. They are parents and friends and healers and leaders and prominent figures of our community who claim to uphold and support community safety. If this is truly about safety, then let's stop masquerading hate as protection. Thank you.
All right, questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you very much. Diana George, please. Oh, I'm sorry, that was your, thank you very much. All right, is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on House Bill 1442? Seeing none, I'm going to close the hearing on House Bill 1442, and I'm going to open the hearing on House Bill 1447 and recognize the prime sponsor, Representative Missouri.